This tutorial will share how to create variations to an assignment in GradeCam. When creating a variation, the assignment uses the same questions with the same answers, but the questions are in a different order. Students will be assigned the different reordered tests, but the results can be displayed together when reviewing the item-specific data. Variations help to create varied assessments while still having the ability to view student responses and results for the mapped questions. Select the assignment that you want to create the variation. Then select the Keys tab. To the left below the scan window, you will see the options to create a mapped variation and a new version. There are some key differences between variations and versions in order to understand the purpose of each. Variations allow for reordering questions while still keeping the ability to map questions so that item-specific data can be reviewed. You cannot adjust the answers between variations. Variations are good for developing reorganized assessments per class or for specific students. Versions can be created new or cloned from the primary. In versions, the question types and answers can be different, but you will not be able to view the multiple versions together when looking at item-specific reports such as the item analysis and the student by question reports. Versions can be created when developing assessment accommodations for specific learners. You can have up to 9 using any combination of variations and versions. For example, you can have 6 variations and 3 versions, which total to 9 overall. All versions and variations must have the same number of questions. To learn more about creating versions, see the video on creating versions to an assignment in GradeCam. To create a mapped variation, select Create Mapped Variation listed under the primary key. This will create a variation that will allow you to move the question order while still collecting that linked item data. The original or primary answer order is listed on the left under primary key A. Listed on the right, you will select the question position on the variation or on the primary key B, where the mapped question will appear. Select the drop-down menu per row to map the existing questions to a new position on the variation. For example, if you select 3 from the drop-down menu, question 1 from the primary will be mapped to the 3rd position on the variation. Once you have selected the questions to map, the drop-down menu will adjust to display the items that are already mapped and the items that are still unmapped. You must map all the questions before navigating off the current variation, or your progress will be discarded. If an item is mapped to multiple locations on a variation, a red section is displayed along with a warning. For an alternate view while mapping, select the Map by Position toggle from the toolbar. This will adjust the view to display the primary key B question order on the left in sequential order, and you will select the question from the primary to be mapped. For example, in the alternate view, now if you select 5 from the drop-down menu on the first row, you are selecting which question from the primary key will be mapped to the first position on the variation. In this example, we have selected to map question 5 from the primary to be displayed as the first question on the variation. This view can also be handy as a check of the question order on primary key B compared to your assignment document. You do have the option to adjust the visible question numbering by selecting the checkbox next to the question and selecting Edit from the toolbar. For example, adjustments can be made to change question number 5 to display as 5A and question 6 to be 5B. Please note this will not adjust the question order, just the displayed number label. Additional variations can be made by selecting the Create Mapped Variation below the primary key A. Each additional variation will map to the original primary key A. By default, the primary or parent version will be named primary key A and the mapped variation will be named primary key B. The versions can be renamed as needed by selecting the 3 ellipses to the right of the version name and selecting Edit Version Name. the mapped variations are renamed to match the parent name with A, B, and so on to indicate the differing variations. Once all your variations and versions are created, you can now distribute the assignment to your students. If you plan to print scan forms for students, please note that in order to have the option for students to select their form variation directly on the form, all versions and variations must have the same answer key layout with matching question types and response options. For example, all questions that are multiple choice with answers options A through F, that when you adjust the question order, the question layout remains the same between the variations. If you have differing question types and setups with those differing questions appearing in a different order, you will need to select the specific variation you would like to print per class or for specific students. If the assignment is published to the assessment portal, be sure to attach the multiple versions of the assignment and select the correct file to be displayed with the corresponding key. Then, in the online access settings for the portal, you must choose whether the variations are randomly assigned or assign specific variations or versions to the class or to specific students. For the data that is available after students have submitted their responses, remember that variations will allow you to view that item-specific data altogether. For example, on the reports like item analysis or the student by question reports. This concludes the tutorial on creating variations to an assignment in GradeCam. To learn more about creating versions, see the video Creating Versions to an Assignment in GradeCam.